the topic today is around the purpose in the pain. And, I know a few of us have had some one-on-one conversations with individuals, have had our own journeys of self-discovery, where whether it is emotional pain, ancestral imprints, or literally physical pain that we have gone through, either as an isolated incident or ongoing, that has been part of our awakening journey. And so really, really actually very happy to have all of you here, because I think everyone who has joined has something very unique to contribute to this conversation. So Yana, I'm going to hand it over to you for a moment, and then let's dive in.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for being here. That's wonderful. And I think pain generally, like the human journey, I think the first thing that comes up for me is like disconnection. Like when pain gets difficult, let's say, or the energy that it brings with, then we kind of feel like, mostly for me, of my own experience, it's like the feeling of separation, right? I'm not one with what I'm feeling, because every time I go in, the pain somehow transcends. So I think it's, again, being still enough to just witness without attachment what the body is telling, from my own experience. And yeah, I think growing up, it was like lots of pain in the legs. Like the more I allow myself to relax and enjoy the cycle, let's say, of relaxation, which is important, the easier it gets in my life. So whoever feels like sharing, or Dana, you can also give some feedback. And I think
Yes.
just having an open conversation is great.
Yeah, that's just to set the stage. That's the intention here. This is a discussion. This is not, Yana and I speaking the whole time and everybody listening. So I invite contributions, personal stories of your journey and how pain influenced your awareness, and or how it presented itself in the body, whether that was, again, through some type of a cycle, subconscious cycle that was passed down through the ancestral imprints, or something specifically just in this lifetime that we were going through as a journey, and how that presented in the body. And Yana, something that I really enjoy about what you just mentioned is that I know through our conversations and prior discussion, part of the management of the actual physical pain that you were experiencing after the car accident that you shared, was being able to breathe into that, right? Breathe into the body and really become still and become mindful and not attach yourself to the pain. And I have a feeling from the conversation that I had briefly with Gary, that's a shared experience to some extent. But Yana, if you want to share a little bit more about that, and then let's open it up to others.
Sure. So 5 years ago, I got hit by a car on a highway. So I was walking up the highway drunk, and we're hit like frontally, like 90 an hour or so. So I kind of saw this coming. It's a topic for another discussion, I think. Kind of manifesting it, knowing that I did it myself. So, but when I woke up, I had like pain in my knees, let's say. After 3 days, or after 2.5 weeks, I've been jogging and running, going inside the pain and learning through breath to alchemize it, or having cold baths and really directing and focusing the healing energy, um, you know, to the healing itself. So I didn't spend any time of like, what if it will take me ages until I'm like, this was not one single thought. So I think like the power that we have through attention and strong will, we can go fast very quickly, heal very quickly, um, move to the next stage of our own soul evolution more quickly. And I also think it doesn't always need to be painful, because I didn't listen to the signs that came before.
Yeah, that really brings up a great point about the attachment to the pain, right? I know when I think about, I didn't have like a specific tragic situation like that. But when I think about just even like childbirth, right? When you focus on the pain, you amplify that, right? You're attaching to it. So love how you used the mindfulness and the breath to move through that and really come back into your center and not amplify the physical experience that you were having.
I find so too. Like it was extremely painful. Like in the nights, let's say, after the days. During the days, it usually hasn't been in the movement, but then sleeping in the night and then having to breathe through it, but through real focus of the breath in the direction that I send it, the pain dissolved. It came back in again and again, but I could observe how I'm moving in and out of the pain, which is psychologically very interesting, I think, because we're not always feeling pain when we're sick, let's say. There are phases when we're out of a certain thinking state. And then, like, we did something for maybe just for 5 minutes watching a video, but in this moment, we haven't had pain. So, the entire phases that we go through, or the different places that our consciousness is visiting, just from simply sitting here, it's very interesting.
That's why there was some intentional invites to this conversation. We can all laugh about it because I know everyone has something to contribute here. So
Yes.
there's something too that I invite, like both Yana and your experience and anyone else who wants to share their experience is, what, if anything, was the lesson in the pain or in that particular experience of pain?
Moving forward, like really having the courage to be myself, to do what I know I need to do, to, do the things that I go to bed and I say, okay, I did it. Be kind to myself and therefore be kind to others. I cleared up things that I didn't need it anymore. So lots of letting go of old conversations, old habits, old ways of behaving, and really reinventing a new identity or way of being, basically, which I'm now in. It's more like a way of being, because there's lots of mindset work that we try to change, right? But the moment I try to change, I think I need to be somewhere else, so I forget the being. So I think I learned to be more. I think this is the why pain, so we can find back to being.
Yeah, back to the center point. James, if you're still with us, I would invite for you to contribute. I know there was some offline conversation about cycles, and so would love to hear your perspective on that as it relates to pain from like a macro perspective.
Yeah, you're kind of putting me on the spot here. Not really prepared for that. But hey, here's the thing about pain, right? Is that we confuse a lot of the words. It's all semantics. It's like somebody's pain is somebody else's pleasure, or somebody feels pain at a certain level but somebody else doesn't. You know what I mean? There's the idea of psychological pain, which is kind of something that doesn't really exist. It's just a way of describing, like kind of what Giannis was talking about, that discomfort or that sense of disconnection, right? We call it pain, but is it pain? So I've in my work and in the last number of years, I've done what I could do within myself, and then when I'm talking to people, to really make a separation of that. Wounding is not something that happens to your psychology. It's not something that happens to your emotions. It's a good metaphor. It's not something that really happens, right? And the same thing with like pain, like psychological pain that's not a real thing. You know what I mean? You break your arm, you get hit by a car, you drug overdose, whatever it is, then, that body is in that physical pain. And that's a whole different level of experience, right? There is the discomfort of the cycles that sometimes we call pain, right? I mean, it was a comment on some post. I get confused. There's so many posts and so many
I didn't mean to put you on the spot too much.
No,
there,
no, it's fine. No, it's fine. I believe me, I have a
Interesting.
lot to say. You'll have to shut me up. But the thing is that we cannot stop cycles. They are always going to happen. Things are always going to happen, and which is not the same as like the wheel of karma, because that doesn't exist either, right? I mean, that's just a made up thing that we for us to try to explain what's going on with life. But I digress on that one. And the cycles are, creation and destruction, and destruction, up and down, in and out. And those transitions are not comfortable, but that's more of like a psychological, emotional place, right? And then there's the cycle of life. Like we get older and stuff happens and the body begins to kind of deteriorate, and, we have aches and pains, and that's, just kind of part of life too, to a certain degree. I don't think we have to suffer the way that we really suffer, But I like what Jana, I'm saying your name wrong. How do you say your name?
You're very close, bro, by the way. So Jana. Yeah.
Jana. Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's easy. Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. Like the emotion is like the plane of feeling. So this is what we interpret it to be.
So what I see with that is that oftentimes, especially in the spiritual world, the spiritual technology world that we are all sort of part of, and the healing world, right, is that we hold on to this terminology, right, of pain, healing, wounding, these kinds of things. And what it has a tendency to do is to kind of keep people in that loop. Oh, my wounding, my childhood wounding, and now I have to heal from my childhood wounding, right? But if we see it in kind of, maybe this harkens back to what you were talking about to a certain extent, if we see it as bad programming, a way of, we've got conditioned, we learned some things that aren't functional for us as adults anymore. There's a much easier way out of it, a much quicker way out of it. Maybe again, hearkening back to what Jana was saying. I don't think that we have to sit in that turmoil for as long as we tend to sit in that turmoil.
Yeah,
That's right.
that connects again with like the concept that I was introducing of the attachment, and like in this case, it's like that's dual, and the way I'm saying it, like both in the parental child attachment, where the terminology of wounded inner child derives, but also in the attachment to that as an identity is, I think, what you're trying to say here, James, right? It's like if we fixate on that, we attach to that as an identity, we perpetuate that cycle. And there are different ways in which we can address that, because there might be something that's showing up that's a repeated pattern of behavior due to that initial attachment related situation. So awareness is key. I love what you're saying too, as far as like not just over analyzing and staying stuck on the mental loop, right? Which can happen to so many of us, where we can't necessarily, and I know we've had this conversation before, James, like there are some things that you just can't put yourself out of. You need to feel through it too. And, so that's where some of the somatics comes in. And if you're not, let's be honest, like, I mean, there's a lot of neurological disorders that arise.
Different story. Yeah, exactly.
If we're not dealing with some of the emotions underneath. But there's a lot of different ways to do it, right? We don't have to necessarily do that all through reliving or rereading the same story over and over again.
Right. And then, what happens a lot of times too, and I think this causes pain in a different way, is that we will move through a certain level of awareness, right? And come into a place where we're like, wow, I've kind of liberated myself, or I'm liberated to a certain extent, and then attached to another identity. So this identity, it's this idea of identities, like we're constantly doing that, right? We're constantly attaching to the next identity and next identity and next identity. Nobody in the world is free of that. Nobody. So this is one of the, big messages that I give to people is like, soon as you think you are something, you better check yourself. Like, go check yourself. Like, really go check yourself. Soon as you think you're enlightened, go back and live with your aging father and find out how much of an asshole you really are, because you learned how to do that. Even though you broke all the rules and you changed and you're doing a bunch of different work, like stuff that they can't even figure out. Believe me.
I love the blend. I love the blend of humility and humor there, James. Thanks for that. So yeah, I saw that Val, you looked like you were getting pretty.
Oh, I was just
conversation. Yeah. Did you watch that?
When he was talking about repeating, going back to the old pattern, saying, oh, this. All we're doing when we do that, when we live in that state, all we're doing is reinforcing the synapses in our brain. This is neuroscience, And so the pain cycle happens, like we might get in an injury, like for example, with Yana, he got in that accident, but he actively worked to break that pain cycle immediately. He worked on that from the very beginning. But some people, they'll have that initial pain for whatever the reason, whatever the cause, whether it's a physical or a traumatic, something that happens and holds in your body, right? And then the cycle continues. And what ends up happening is the body thinks, or the brain thinks, I need to send this hormone out into the body to stop this cycle. So let's just use cortisol because it's what everybody knows, right? So the cortisol goes out into the body, and it will go into the area that is the weakest in your body. That's the area that will pop up and get inflamed because the cortisol doesn't know what to do, in these cycles. And then it will end up, then that signal that where that area starts to get inflamed, that goes to the brain and says, hey, I hurt, I need more cortisol. And then that cortisol keeps coming down. So, and it ends up being this perpetual cycle. And
because
sometimes,
to it.
Sorry?
Because the body's addicted to it. The body's addicted to that.
And it's not even just addiction, it's the natural way that our body is meant to heal. Like, for example, when we get a cut, then the cortisol goes in and it helps the blood rush and it helps bring the healing qualities to that cut, so then the body can self-heal. But the problem is that we used to be a lot more active. This is one of the reasons why movement helps so much. Like James and I talked about it a little bit yesterday. But when you go out and run, you're sloughing that cortisol off. And a lot of the times we don't do this anymore, right? We don't have that movement. It's like when, back in the day when we would go out and when we were still hunters and gatherers, our body has not developed so quickly from that state as technology has. So now here we are sitting with each other, And so what happens is we get in this pain cycle, and there's a functional aspect of it that's where we can break the cycle, is through the functional aspect of it. The structural aspect, like if your bone gets broken, your bone is broken. But we can then go in a functional way and cut that pain cycle so that it doesn't have to live inside of us anymore.
Right. And I would like to bring something very critical forward when we're talking about neuroscience, which is an aspect of what I, have as part of my core tenets, is that It starts with awareness, though. So we do have to have an awareness. We don't need to sit and relive the cycle.
Exactly.
Reinforce it. But in order to interrupt the pattern, we first have to become aware of it. So there is
Absolutely.
a level that's require the mind to be present with the body as well, and the
Yes.
experience. But
Yeah.
the trick is not to fall into the the spin cycle of continuing on the same storyline. But in order
Yeah.
to construct it, we have to recognize it before we can replace it, using the terminology that I have in my coursework. So that is important, but where we overpronate oftentimes as human beings, because our egos want to attach to things, to identities, to stories, to anything that seems to give us some sense of understanding, is that when we first become aware, we have to be able to learn to separate the awareness of the story and the awareness of ourself. And this pulls it right back to some of what Jana was sharing about coming back to the breath as well.
Yeah,
Out of,
absolutely.
back into the body.
Absolutely. And that's how we're able to step in a way and attach what's happening on a functional level and break the cycle. And then we start to send the signal of healing to the body. So it can happen immediately if you're tuned in and able to do it, you can reach a point where you can let go of the pain immediately.
Yeah, definitely. So Gary, you are so patiently waiting and listening and observing. But I know from your story that you have had a lot of pain, physical pain, in your journey. And I know that you shared that it led to a big piece of your awakening as well. So I invite you to share a little bit of that with us, and how you moved through that pain and how it transformed you as well.
Sure. Well, yeah, I've had 30 years of extreme chronic pain, like getting up and your blood pressure is 200 over whatever, and had a heart attack mainly from that high blood pressure because I was in so much pain it would make me nauseous. And I'm still in a decent amount of pain every day. One of the things that I learned during this process was how to have a different relationship with pain. And Jana talked about that. Val talked about. Dana, you talked about. James talked. It's true, because you have to. It identified me for so many years because I went through. Every time I would talk to somebody, I'm like, "You don't have a clue. You stubbed your toe. Get away from me. I don't want to talk to you." And so I would have this chip on my shoulder because people didn't understand what real pain was, in my opinion. And it's all relative. That's one thing we learned. James talked about that. It's all relative. My worst pain may be more than yours, but if you don't experience my worst pain, your pain is the worst you've ever felt. So therefore, it's the same. So. And I had to get over that relationship to pain. I had to get over that identification to that pain. And as soon as I started to realize this pain is a gift to keeping me in the moment, to keeping me centered, to keeping me grounded, to encourage me to work with my fascia, to encourage me to work with my mental status, to let go of the traumas, to do all of those things that leads you back to the pain. And so it's a cycle. The whole thing is a cycle. And once you realize that, and once you finally come to terms with it and let go of the traumas, let go of the angst, let go of the guilt, let go of the doubt, and start focusing on healing